Victoria Winters stood at the grand window of her opulent mansion, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow across the lavishly decorated living room. The walls, adorned with priceless art pieces, echoed the wealth and status of the Winters family, a testament to decades of affluence. Today was special, her daughter Emily's 15th birthday. It would be a celebration, a spectacle, a showcase of their wealth meant to dazzle their high society friends. Emily, with her youthful exuberance and naive charm, bounded into the room, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "What is it, Mom?" Emily asked, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She wore a delicate dress that flowed like water, a pastel hue chosen to highlight her youthful beauty. "Look at these arrangements," Victoria exclaimed, gesturing toward the extravagant flower arrangements and the elegant table settings. "I want everything to be perfect, you understand, don't you? This is your moment to shine, to show everyone who we are." Emily nodded, her gaze drifting toward the grand chandelier, while Maria organized the dining area. She caught snippets of Victoria's conversation with Emily. The words floated down the hall, sharp and deliberate. "Let's invite that Lopez family. I think it will be amusing. Just imagine their faces at a party like this." Maria's heart sank. She paused, her dust cloth hovering in midair. Victoria wanted to humiliate her, to use her family as a prop in a spectacle meant to showcase their wealth. The thought ignited a flame of determination within her. How dare Victoria think she could use her as a pawn in her twisted game? Shaking off the anger, Maria resumed her work, forcing herself to focus on the tasks at hand. She recalled her daughter's laughter, the way it filled their small home with joy, and her husband's unwavering support. They were her true treasures, not the hollow extravagance that surrounded her in the Winters mansion. Later that afternoon, as guests began to arrive, the atmosphere shifted. Laughter and chatter filled the air, mingling with the clinking of glasses and the rustling of expensive fabrics. Victoria flitted about, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction as she greeted each guest, her social prowess on full display. "Darling, isn't it splendid?" she remarked to a friend, her voice laced with pride. "Everything is just as I envisioned." Meanwhile, Maria stood in the kitchen, arranging trays of hors d'oeuvres, her heart pounding with anxiety. She had dressed in her best attire, simple yet elegant, but she still felt out of place among the glittering guests. As she carefully placed the food on the table, she could hear Emily's laughter mingling with the voices of the elite, and for a moment she allowed herself to smile at the sound. "Maria," Emily called out, her voice bright and cheerful. Maria turned, and her heart warmed at the sight of the young girl. "Come see the decorations. It's so beautiful." With a nod, Maria wiped her hands on her apron and followed Emily into the grand hall. The sight before her was breathtaking. The room had been transformed into a fairy tale, complete with twinkling fairy lights and an extravagant cake that looked like it belonged in a royal palace. Just then, Victoria swept into the room, her presence commanding attention. She clapped her hands, drawing the guests' eyes toward her. "Everyone, look at my beautiful daughter," she announced, her tone dripping with pride. "And let's not forget our special guest, Maria, who has helped make this day so special." Maria's stomach twisted as she heard the sharpness in Victoria's voice, the way it dripped with condescension. The guests turned their heads, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Victoria continued, her words laced with a mocking tone. "Maria, why don't you come and tell everyone about your humble life?" The room fell silent. Maria felt a sudden chill wash over her. The invitation was laced with malice, a clear attempt to expose her and her family. She glanced at Emily, who looked confused, her brow furrowed as she tried to understand her mother's intentions. "Mom, that's not fair," Emily protested, her youthful innocence shining through. "Maria is our friend. She shouldn't be made to feel uncomfortable." Victoria waved her hand dismissively, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Oh, sweetheart, it's just a bit of fun. We want to know where our lovely housekeeper comes from, don't we?" Maria took a deep breath, her heart racing. She felt a surge of defiance rising within her. No matter Victoria's intentions, she would not allow herself to be humiliated. She would stand tall, not just for herself but for her family. "Thank you, Victoria, but I think I'll pass," Maria said, her voice steady. "I'm here to help, not to entertain." The tension in the room was palpable, and for a fleeting moment, Maria felt the eyes of the guests shifting between her and Victoria, waiting for the next move. Victoria's expression faltered briefly, surprise flickering across her features. "Oh, come now, Maria. Don't be shy. Everyone is dying to know your story," she pressed, her smile more of a grimace now. Maria could feel the weight of their gazes, some filled with curiosity, others with pity, but she wouldn't give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Instead, she straightened her back, ready to face whatever came next. As the evening wore on, Maria could sense the tension between her and Victoria growing thicker. She had no idea what awaited her in the coming hours. But one thing was clear. Tonight would not just be a party. It would be a battle of wills. Victoria leaned closer, her voice low but laced with mockery. "Maria, why don't you tell them what it's like to work for someone like me? I'm sure they'd love to hear about your challenges." The laughter grew louder, and Maria felt the urge to flee. But she forced herself to stand tall. "It's a job like any other," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. "I do my best to keep everything in order." "Isn't she charming?" Victoria said, her eyes sparkling with delight at the unfolding drama. "What would we do without our little helpers?" Maria's breath hitched, but she refused to let Victoria's taunts break her spirit. Instead, she turned to the guests, a flicker of defiance igniting within her. "I believe every job has its worth, and every person deserves respect," she stated, her voice gaining strength. The guests exchanged glances, some looking taken aback, while others leaned in, intrigued. For a brief moment the laughter faded, replaced by a hushed curiosity. "Oh, look, she thinks she's profound," Victoria scoffed. She could feel the shift in the air, the tension thickening as the party continued. "Maria, why don't you help with the drinks?" Victoria suggested, her voice cold and dismissive. "I'm sure everyone would love to see how you handle that." "Yes, Mrs. Winters," Maria replied, not allowing the bitterness in Victoria's tone to dampen her spirit. She turned away, moving toward the serving area, where the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation filled the air. As she poured drinks, Maria's mind raced. She had come to this party filled with apprehension, but now she felt a resolve building within her. No matter what Victoria had planned, she wouldn't allow herself to be the punchline of a cruel joke. "Hey, you okay?" David, her husband, appeared at her side, concern etched on his face. Maria looked up, meeting his warm gaze. "I'm fine. Just trying to keep my head above water," she replied, forcing a smile. David nodded, the understanding between them palpable. "Remember, you're stronger than you think. Don't let her get to you." "I won't," Maria promised, her heart swelling with determination. No longer would she allow herself to be a mere reflection of someone else's power. Today would change everything, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she would face it with dignity and strength. As the party continued to swell with laughter and chatter, the echo of clinking glasses filled the expansive ballroom. Victoria Winters stood at the center of it all, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a crystal flute of champagne. The shimmering lights cast a warm glow over her designer gown, accentuating her figure as she surveyed her guests with a sense of pride that bordered on arrogance. They were the elite, the who's who of society, and tonight she intended to remind them of her impeccable status. Meanwhile, Maria Lopez, the housekeeper whose life revolved around caring for the Winters family, was navigating through the crowd with an air of resilience. She had dressed carefully for the occasion, donning a simple but elegant navy blue dress that flowed softly with each step. It was a stark contrast to the extravagant gowns worn by the guests, but Maria wore it with dignity. She felt out of place, yet a flame of determination burned within her. She would not allow herself to feel inferior, not tonight. Maria's heart swelled with warmth as she searched for Emily, Victoria's daughter. The young girl had been her light amidst the opulence that often felt suffocating. Their bond was genuine. "Maria!" Emily called out, her voice carrying over the din of the party. She rushed toward Maria, her blonde curls bouncing with each enthusiastic step. I'm so glad you're here. Come, let's take a picture together." Maria felt her heart flutter at Emily's innocent joy. They posed together, Emily beaming as she threw her arm around Maria's shoulders. The camera clicked, capturing their bond in that fleeting moment. As they stepped away from the camera, Emily leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I wanted to show you my new dress. It's just like the one Cinderella wore to the ball." She twirled, her dress swirling around her like a cloud of pastel colors. "What do you think?" Maria chuckled, her eyes sparkling. "You look like a princess, Emily. Just remember, being a princess is about kindness and bravery, not just the dress." Emily's expression turned thoughtful. "You're right. It's just that sometimes I feel like I have to impress everyone here. My mom says it's important to show off our wealth." She cast a glance at her mother, who was now deep in conversation with a group of socialites, her laughter ringing out like a chime of silver bells. "Your worth isn't defined by what you wear or how much money you have," Maria said gently. "It's about who you are inside. You have a good heart, and that's what truly matters." Victoria, standing a few feet away, had observed the interaction with a growing irritation. Her carefully crafted facade of sophistication cracked slightly as she watched her daughter confide in the help. The mere sight of Maria connecting with Emily sparked a familiar rage within her, and she forced a smile, masking her discontent. An idea began to form in her mind, one that would put Maria in her place and remind everyone of their societal hierarchies. "Emily," Victoria called out, her voice sharp and commanding. "Come here at once. I need you to greet our guests." Emily's face fell, the warmth of their moment dissipating as she turned reluctantly toward her mother. "But Mom, I was just—" "Now, dear," Victoria insisted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You have a responsibility to uphold." Maria watched as Emily hesitated, caught between her mother's demands and her desire to stay with her friend. "Go on, Emily," Maria encouraged softly. "I'll be right here." It was clear that Victoria's control over her daughter was suffocating, a reminder of the class divide that loomed over them like a shadow. She took a breath, steadying herself as she turned to refill her glass of water at a nearby table. Victoria, meanwhile, was concocting her plan, a smirk playing on her lips as she leaned toward her group of friends. "You won't believe the surprise I have in store for the evening," she said, her voice dripping with malice. She envisioned the moment vividly, Maria standing under the glaring lights, all eyes on her, the laughter of the elite ringing in her ears. It would be deliciously entertaining. Just as Victoria was about to make her move, Maria, with a newfound determination, approached the microphone that had been set up for speeches. The room fell silent, the chatter fading into a hush as all eyes turned toward her. The moment felt electric, a strange shift in the atmosphere as anticipation hung heavy in the air. Excuse me," Maria began, her voice steady despite the sudden attention. The crowd's curiosity was palpable, and Victoria's smug expression faltered slightly as she realized that Maria was about to break the silence. "What is she doing?" Victoria muttered under her breath, a frown creeping onto her face. Maria took a deep breath, her heart racing as she stood before the crowd. "I just wanted to say a few words," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "Tonight is a celebration of not just a birthday, but also of friendship and community." As she spoke, Victoria's irritation boiled beneath the surface. This was not part of her plan. The guests shifted in their seats, captivated by Maria's authenticity. The housekeeper continued, her eyes scanning the crowd, feeling an unexpected surge of courage. "I've seen families come together during both good and challenging times," Maria said, her voice resonating with sincerity. "It's in these moments that we realize the value of love and support, no matter our backgrounds." Victoria's face contorted in frustration, the laughter she had anticipated now replaced by a collective admiration for Maria. She clenched her fists, her mind racing to regain control over the evening. Suddenly the atmosphere shifted as Victoria, resplendent in a shimmering gold gown that seemed to scream wealth, took the stage. Her voice echoed through the ballroom, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate Emily's transition into womanhood," she began, her tone dripping with the kind of smugness that only the truly privileged could muster. But let us also take a moment to acknowledge someone else who has played an important role in our lives. Maria, our dear housekeeper. The crowd turned, eyes narrowing as they focused on Maria. Victoria's smile was sharp, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Thank you, everyone," she began, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word. "I'm not used to speaking in front of so many people, but I'm honored to be here tonight." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. Maria had always been the quiet one, the shadow that flitted about the mansion. But there was something undeniably captivating about her sincerity. "I've worked for the Winters family for many years," she continued, her tone shifting from nervousness to a gentle strength. "And in that time, I've come to love this family, especially Emily. She's like a daughter to me." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. "I've made many sacrifices for my own family, just like any mother would. I've worked hard to provide for them, to give them opportunities I never had." A faint smile crossed her lips as she recalled her children, their laughter filling their modest home. "I dream of a better life for them, just as I'm sure all of you do for your families." Victoria's expression faltered, her smugness replaced with a hint of irritation as she realized the crowd was no longer focused on her plan to humiliate Maria. The guests began to lean in, captivated by Maria's raw honesty. In a world where we often judge each other by our appearances and our wealth, it's important to remember that true value lies in our hearts and our actions. As she spoke, Emily stood beside her, a beacon of support. "That's right, Maria. You're amazing," she chimed in, her youthful exuberance shining through. The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, a ripple of admiration growing stronger with each passing moment. The sight of Emily standing by Maria's side, so proud and unashamed, sent a fresh wave of determination through Maria. Victoria's irritation morphed into fury. How dare they turn against her? The guests were no longer laughing at Maria. They were beginning to applaud her bravery. "What is this?" Victoria hissed under her breath, her mind racing as she scrambled to regain control of the situation. She had expected to be the star of the evening, the one who would showcase her power and social standing. But now she felt the tide turning against her. "Maria, you're inspiring," a voice from the crowd called out, and the applause grew louder. People began to stand, clapping and cheering for her resilience, a stark contrast to the intent behind Victoria's earlier words. For the first time, Maria felt a swell of pride, a sense of belonging that had long evaded her. "Thank you," Maria said, her voice breaking slightly as she fought back tears. "I never imagined I would have this opportunity to share my story. I just want to remind everyone that no matter where you come from, you have the power to make a difference." Victoria's face twisted in disbelief, her carefully crafted image crumbling before her very eyes. "Enough of this nonsense," she finally shouted, her voice slicing through the applause like a knife. "This is a party for my daughter, not a platform for a maid to air her grievances." Gasps filled the crowd as shock rippled through the guests. Maria's heart sank, but she steadied herself, refusing to let Victoria's words defeat her. "I'm not here to air grievances, Victoria. I'm here to celebrate life, love, and the bonds we share," she said, her voice steady and firm. "Celebrating life?" Victoria sneered, her composure slipping. "You're nothing but a glorified housekeeper. You don't belong here." But the crowd was no longer on Victoria's side. Whispers of discontent spread among the guests, their eyes narrowing at the woman who had once encapsulated their ideals of wealth and privilege. Maria stood tall, her heart racing yet emboldened by the support of those around her. "Victoria, maybe it's time to reflect on what truly matters," Emily interjected, stepping forward. "Maria is more than just our housekeeper. She's part of our family. You should be proud of her." The room grew tense as eyes shifted between the two women. Victoria's face turned crimson with rage, but the guests began to murmur in agreement with Emily, their loyalty shifting like the wind. Maria's heart swelled with gratitude for Emily's unwavering support, and she took a deep breath, her mind racing with thoughts of justice and dignity. As the applause surged once more, Maria felt a newfound strength within her, a fire ignited by the realization that she was not alone. Victoria's attempts to belittle her were falling flat, and the laughter that had once been directed at her was now aimed squarely at the woman who sought to humiliate her. As the atmosphere in the grand hall began to shift, Victoria Winters stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. She had expected her plan to unfold with smooth precision. Maria would stumble through her humiliation, and the elite guests would erupt in laughter. Instead, the audience was captivated by the raw sincerity radiating from the humble housekeeper. Maria had taken the microphone, and with each word, she wove a tapestry of her life that resonated with everyone present. "Growing up, I had dreams of becoming a singer," Maria began, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion beneath it. "I wanted to share my stories and my heart through music." With every syllable, she painted vivid images of her childhood, her dreams, and the sacrifices she made for her family. The guests leaned in, captivated not only by her words but also by the depth of her spirit. "I worked hard to provide a better life for my children, believing that one day I could give them the opportunities I never had." Victoria clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she fought to regain control of the situation. This was not how the night was supposed to unfold. "Enough of this nonsense," she shouted, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Let her speak," Emily interjected, her voice rising above her mother's. The young girl, once naive and blissfully unaware, now stood tall beside Maria, a fierce protector against her mother's wrath. "She deserves to be heard." The tension in the room thickened as Victoria's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "This is a party for my daughter, not a stage for your sob stories," she spat, but her words fell flat. The crowd was no longer on her side. They were rallying behind Maria, who stood resolute, her heart racing but her spirit unbroken. With a deep breath, Maria sensed the shift in the room and decided to embrace the moment. "I know I may not fit into your world," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But I have something to share that is bigger than wealth or status. I have my voice." As she spoke, she could feel a warmth swell within her, an ember of confidence igniting. "Let me show you," she continued, her eyes sparkling with determination. She took a step back from the microphone, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and then began to sing. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, a lullaby of hope and resilience that filled the vast hall. It was a song her mother used to sing to her when times were tough, reminding her that dreams could still flourish in the darkest of moments. As Maria's voice soared, the audience fell silent, captivated by the emotion that poured from her. It was as if the room had transformed. The opulence of the mansion faded away, replaced by a connection that transcended class and privilege. Guests exchanged glances, some with tears in their eyes, as they witnessed a moment of genuine artistry that cut through the facade of wealth that Victoria had so carefully constructed. Victoria's expression shifted from anger to bewilderment. She could feel the tide turning against her. The very guests she had hoped would mock Maria were now cheering for her. "Stop this at once," she shouted, but her voice was lost in the sea of applause that erupted around her. "Bravo," someone called out, and soon the room was filled with enthusiastic clapping and cheers. Maria opened her eyes, her heart swelling with a mixture of disbelief and joy. She had not only shared her story but had transformed the atmosphere entirely. The guests were no longer just spectators. They were part of a collective experience that celebrated resilience and authenticity. "Look at her," a gentleman exclaimed, his voice filled with admiration. "She deserves to be celebrated, not ridiculed." Emily beamed with pride, her heart swelling as she watched Maria shine. "You're amazing," she shouted, her voice cutting through the applause. "You're so much more than just a housekeeper." Victoria's face burned with humiliation, and her mind raced with the realization that her plan had backfired spectacularly. She had aimed to elevate her own status by belittling Maria, but instead she had amplified Maria's voice and spirit. The guests had rallied around the woman she sought to humiliate, and now Victoria stood isolated, the center of attention for all of the wrong reasons. "Enough," Victoria finally managed to say, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is my daughter's birthday party, and you all have forgotten why you're here. You're supposed to be celebrating wealth and privilege, not this." She gestured wildly at Maria, but her words were met with a chorus of disapproval. "Victoria, this is not about wealth," a guest replied, shaking their head. "It's about humanity. Maria's story is far more compelling than any display of riches." As the cheers continued to swell, Victoria felt the weight of her isolation. She was surrounded by people who once admired her wealth but now looked at her with pity, as if she were the one who had lost everything. The walls of her carefully constructed world were crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Amidst the applause, Maria felt a sense of liberation wash over her. She had stepped beyond the boundaries set by her employer and had found her voice. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking through the noise. "Thank you for believing in me." The sincerity in her words resonated deeply with the guests, who felt a connection to her story and her courage. As the cheers faded, Maria took a deep breath, a new determination settling in her heart. She had fought against the humiliation and come out victorious, not just for herself, but for all those who had felt marginalized and dismissed. In that moment, she realized that she was more than just a housekeeper. She was a beacon of hope, a reminder that true worth is not measured by wealth, but by the strength of one's character and the courage to pursue one's dreams. The night had turned in her favor, and as she stood there, surrounded by applause and admiration, she glanced at Victoria, who was now a mere shadow of her former self. There was no triumph in Maria's heart. Rather, it was a profound understanding of the journey that lay ahead. The dynamics had shifted, and the power that Victoria once held was now slipping through her fingers like sand. As the crowd continued to celebrate, Maria locked eyes with Emily, who beamed with pride. "We did this together," Maria said softly, her heart swelling with gratitude. Emily nodded, her eyes shining with admiration. The night was far from over, and Maria felt a newfound strength coursing through her veins. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them head-on, no longer afraid to embrace her identity and her voice. The celebration of Emily's birthday had transformed into a celebration of resilience, and in that moment Maria understood that true power lay in authenticity and connection, a lesson that would resonate far beyond the walls of the Winters mansion. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom shifted dramatically, the air electric with disbelief as the last notes of Maria's powerful song faded into silence. The guests, once enraptured by her talent, now seemed caught in a web of confusion and intrigue. Eyes turned to the back of the room where a tall, mysterious man stood, his presence commanding and unsettling. He wore a sleek black suit that contrasted sharply with the opulence surrounding him, and his intense gaze seemed to pierce through the pretense of the evening. "Excuse me, everyone," he announced, his voice deep and steady, silencing the murmurs and laughter that had filled the space moments before. "I believe there's something crucial that needs to be said. Something about Maria Lopez." Victoria, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had envisioned this evening as a showcase of her wealth and social dominance, a night where she could belittle Maria without consequence. Now the tide was turning, and the last thing she wanted was for this stranger to derail her plans further. "Who are you?" Victoria interjected, her tone laced with authority. "What do you know about Maria?" The man turned his focus on her, his expression inscrutable. "I am Jonathan Hale, and I come with information that could change everything you think you know about Maria." His gaze flickered momentarily to Maria, whose eyes widened in shock. "Maria," he continued, "you deserve to know the truth about your family." The guests shifted uneasily, their curiosity piqued. They could sense the gravity of the situation, and whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "What family? What truth?" one guest murmured, leaning closer to catch every word. Taking a deep breath, Maria felt her heart race. Who was this man? And what could he possibly know about her? She had spent her life keeping her head down, working hard to support her family, and here was someone claiming to unravel the very fabric of her existence. "Maria is not just a humble housekeeper," Jonathan continued, his voice resonating with authority. "She's the last descendant of the Montoya family, a lineage that dates back to the early days of this city's founding. Her family was once among the wealthiest and most influential in the region. Gasps filled the room, and Maria felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. The Montoya family. She had heard the name whispered in her childhood, stories of grandeur and loss, but they had always felt like distant fairy tales, nothing but echoes from a past that had no place in her life. Jonathan's eyes softened as he regarded Maria, sensing her confusion. Your family lost everything due to betrayal and greed, Maria. But I'm here to tell you that the fortune of the Montoyas hasn't vanished. It has merely been hidden. You are the rightful heir to a significant estate, properties, and assets that have been waiting for you to reclaim. The ballroom erupted into chaos with gasps and murmurs of disbelief. Victoria, her face drained of color, staggered back, her mind racing. How could this be? The very notion that Maria could be wealthy, that her status could change overnight, was more than she could handle. Enough, Victoria exclaimed, her voice breaking through the cacophony. This is preposterous. There are no Montoyas left. You're just trying to ruin this evening, trying to make a spectacle of my daughter's birthday. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but instead she found sympathetic gazes directed at Maria. Jonathan held up a hand, silencing Victoria with a calm authority. I understand this is difficult to accept, but I have documents, records that confirm Maria's lineage. The Montoya estate is real, and it is hers by right. He turned to Maria, his expression earnest. You deserve to know your history, Maria. You deserve to reclaim your legacy. Maria's heart raced with a mixture of emotions: fear, hope, anger. She felt the weight of all those years spent in servitude, the sacrifices she had made for her family, and the dreams that had been stifled. But why now? Why didn't anyone come forward before? She managed to ask, her voice trembling. Because, Jonathan replied, those who betrayed your family have kept this secret for too long, fearing the day you would discover the truth. They wanted to ensure you remained in the shadows, far removed from your rightful place in society. Victoria's composure crumbled as she felt the eyes of her guests upon her, searching for answers. This is nonsense, she spat, her voice laced with desperation. You're all being fooled by this charade. Maria is just a housekeeper. She doesn't belong in our world. On the contrary, Jonathan said, his gaze unwavering. Maria belongs to a world that you have tried to keep her from, and it's time for the truth to come to light. The tension in the room was palpable, as guests exchanged glances, the realization settling in that the woman they had belittled moments ago held a heritage far richer than they had imagined. Maria took a step forward, her heart pounding, her mind racing. What do I have to do? She asked, her voice steadying with newfound resolve. How can I reclaim what is mine? Jonathan smiled, a flicker of pride in his eyes. You must be willing to confront the past, to gather the necessary documents and prove your lineage. But you will not be alone. I will help you every step of the way. Victoria's face twisted in anger, her facade of superiority shattered. You will not take this from me, she hissed, her voice rising in pitch. I built this life for my daughter. You have no right to disrupt it. Your life is built on the oppression of others, Victoria. Jonathan shot back, his tone fierce. And it's time for that to end. Maria stood firm, her heart swelling with courage. She had spent too long in the shadows, afraid to dream of more than her humble existence. Now, with the weight of her past and the possibility of a future before her, she felt a fire ignite within. I will not be ashamed of who I am, Maria declared, her voice cutting through the tension. I will not allow you to belittle my worth any longer. If I am the heir to the Montoya name, then I will embrace it. I will reclaim my place, not just for myself, but for my family. The guests erupted into applause, their support ringing true, drowning out Victoria's protests. Maria felt a rush of gratitude and empowerment as she stood before them, no longer just a housekeeper, but a woman ready to embrace her destiny. As the applause echoed around her, Maria turned to Jonathan, her eyes shining with determination. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for believing in me. Jonathan nodded, a warm smile gracing his lips. You have always had the strength within you, Maria. Now it's time for the world to see it too. The ballroom buzzed with excitement and whispers of what was to come. Maria locked eyes with Victoria, whose expression was a mix of fury and disbelief. In that moment, the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably, and Maria felt a sense of freedom she had never known. The door to her future swung open, and as guests continued to congratulate her, she stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. In the depths of her heart, she knew that she was no longer defined by her past. She was becoming the architect of her own story.